Today I tried making the dimension that I think would be cool to have on the other side of the ancient city portal, because Mojang haven't added one yet. This is one of my biggest projects in a while, and it was so much more of a pain to build than you could ever imagine. If you enjoy, please remember to leave a like and subscribe, but let's get started! First, I need to introduce you to someone who's pretty important for the lore of this dimension. This is you. Or rather, it could be you, but in this scenario, it isn't. We're going to call them the Traveller. They're the player who existed just before you did in this world, and they're just about to take on the final challenge. Because they've done just about everything else. They've built a base, they've defeated the Ender Dragon, and even the Wither, and now they're ready to take on the ancient city and get through the final dimension of the game. I imagine that the ancient city portal isn't just opened with a flint and steel, but I imagine something needs to be done at the other side of the city along this prominent walkway. And that's not going to be a quiet thing. No, as our travellers just found out, by lighting the portal, it has summoned every single warden it possibly could in the area. So they begin the mad dash through the city to get into the portal before being completely obliterated by the wardens, just as you do if you decide to follow in this traveller's footsteps. Having only just got through the portal, they are greeted with this. Welcome to the deep dark dimension. A place once so full of life, but now a desolate landscape, towered over by the remains of something sinister. But hold on. Let's rewind a little bit. A few thousand years before the Traveller's story is set, this place would have looked very different. A grassy, beautiful landscape, towered over by the once apex predators, the ancient Wardens. You see, just as birds are evolved from dinosaurs, Wardens are evolved from this. And the skulk that we know today was once just a way of these giant Wardens digesting their food. Until things took a turn for the worse. A particularly large version of one of these ancient Wardens decided it would be a good idea to eat one of the younger Wardens. But once consumed, the young Warden was not turned into skulk and did not die, continuing to live on inside of the larger Warden. But when the larger Warden finally died, the young Warden did not, and catastrophe happened. You see, skulk is formed by things dying near a skulk catalyst, and that skulk catalyst will then spread the skulk onto the surrounding blocks. Well, this young Warden had just become the world's first skulk catalyst, and something enormous had just died on top of it. No prizes for guessing what happened next. The skulk that was produced from this Warden dying ended up with almost the entire world becoming covered in the stuff. The native life forms managed to open a rift to escape this dimension and formed the ancient city in the overworld. When building this dimension, I decided I wanted a little bit more control over the building process, so instead of using tools like World Painter, I decided to make it all myself. So after laying out a shape for the platform, I decide I want the bottom of it to have stalactites, because you are going to be able to see this by flying off the edge. But I make them on the top of the platform instead of underneath, because it's just way easier to build upright instead of down. I give them a gradient going all the way from skulk down to deep slate, so that we can see that the skulk is so embedded that it's right down at the bottom of this platform. Next, for the landscape on top of the platform. Now, there's nothing special going on here because it's basically just to frame the things that are going on in this world. But I will note that it slopes up slightly towards the far side and the side that the rift will be on. Then I paint the landscape with these enormous patches of skulk which have been formed from the death of this mega Warden. Speaking of the massive Warden, it's Warden skeleton building time! I start by marking out what will be the backbone of this Warden. Now let me stop us here, dear viewer. This is the worst decision I ever made. Because of course this backbone isn't just leaning to the left, it's also leaning forwards, which means that everything else about this skeleton also has to be slanted to the left on a diagonal, and also slanting forwards on a diagonal, which just means that most world edit commands won't work to help me build this. Let me show you what I mean, because we're moving onto the ribs. In my first attempt at rib building, I pretty much immediately realised what the problem is, because I cannot get my head around how to slant these stupid ribs! So instead of building them directly onto the Warden, I build them away from it, flat, and then I use this enormous netherite frame using world edit commands to slant the entire thing, block by block. It's so painful. But don't worry, I don't just have to do this one time, I actually have to do it 3 times, because I've decided to build 3 variants of ribs. Now before I get to complaining, I mean building the head, I would just like to mention that it does look like the big Warden here has a lot more ribs than it should do, but that's actually just to keep it looking a little bit more intimidating and solid when the final thing's done. Now onto the head. Now I make it a little bit more squashed than it should be, and that's because when turning it on the diagonal, it will stretch out the head and flatten it down a bit. So when twisting it, I treat it as though it's just a big version of the rib using the same netherite frame. Now after popping the head on and then giving the whole thing a paint, going from a gradient from calcite to mushroom blocks, this Warden skeleton is nearly done. There is just one more thing to add, and that is the first sculk catalyst, the younger Warden, which I hang in sculk vines from the Warden's rib cage, and it just looks like a little soul, like every single Warden in the overworld has on its chest. Now time to turn our attention to the initial settlers who fled through the portal to the overworld and built the ancient city. Now because they built the ancient city, of course some architecture will have carried across, so I copy and paste some of the towers, one of the altar buildings, one of these really rundown buildings, and then I repair it, and then I add one of my own, and then I build up this walkway just like it is in the ancient city, so you can really see where it came from, but this is not run down because unlike the ancient city, it's been preserved by no natural animals being left in this world. Now I make the rift that they escaped through. No one's quite sure how they made this rift, but this is the place that you will be dropped into this world. This rift is also probably the reason that the ancient city fell into the skulky chaos that it is today. However, by the point that the traveler's coming along, the ancient city is the only place in the overworld that skulk can be found. There's none in the caves, just in the city, and we'll find out why a little bit later. For the rift, I make a gradient going from orange to red to purple to magenta to dark blue to light blue and finally to water in the center, because the water is a little bit more solid than the glass, so it makes it look like there's actually a tear there and that the cracks are just cracks instead of the actual rift itself, which is the water. The last thing for me to do is to add some mushrooms which have flourished on the skulk, and I make 3 variants to put around, one with a tall cap, one with a flat cap, and one with 2 flat caps. I put these around, add a bit of skulkage, and this dimension is done. So now we're caught up to when the mysterious traveller runs through the city, gets through the portal, and appears through the rift. They journey through this world, leaving behind a few traces that they were once here, with the end goal of reaching the Warden skeleton and defeating the boss of this dimension, which would open up the rest of the biomes to explore. And that final boss is of course the first Skulk Catalyst. The Traveller fights so hard to defeat the Skulk Catalyst and become victorious over this dimension. But this is not their tale to win. The Traveller is pushed by the sonic shrieks off the ribs of the Mega Warden, falling to their inevitable death in proximity of the Skulk Catalyst, which spreads the Skulk through the rift and into the rest of the overworld. But the story doesn't end there. Then it would be the player's turn to journey into this place and finish what the Traveller could not. If you guys enjoyed this video and would like to see me expand on this dimension, then I would love to return. But to finish our story for today, this is you. Or rather, this could be you. For now, we'll call you the Traveller. No one knows how many people have come before you, and no one knows how many people will follow. If you enjoyed, please remember to leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye! If you enjoyed this video, why not go check out my Build a Day challenge?